Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about the worst books that I read in 2024. This is going to be the first of the, what are the lists? I'm doing worst books, best books, and then a book combining surprises and disappointments. I am not doing a DNF video because I have so many DNFs. It was the DNF year, so I just don't feel like rehashing and going back through all of those. This is the only one that I can actually film right now because I am continuing to read for the rest of the year. It is December 20th. Yes, it is December 20th right now. And I literally finished a book yesterday that is on my new favorites, and I finished a book the day before that that is going to be on most disappointed. So I am still reading things that are going on these lists. Now, I do not think there will be another for worst books just because I am being very particular about what I'm reading at the end of this year. There's going to be potentially some rereads with Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. There's going to be some Christmas romances, which are just fun. Like, I don't see them being worst books. And if I start not liking something, I'm not going to continue it. Like, I'm just not going to do it. And this worst list does not contain any DNFs. I don't think that's fair. There are 2 DNFs in like the honorable mentions for worst books, but they're not in the actual physical top 10 worst books that I read. I don't foresee there being any worst books, but there could be new favorites and new surprises and new disappointments. So this is the only one that I can film right now. So this will be coming out earlier than the other 2. We have so many other things to fill in until the very last week of December and the first week of January, because that's when all those are going to be coming out. So anyway, let's start with the honorable mentions. I'm not going to talk about them too much. I'm going to try and keep this succinct because I have actually a couple of honorable mentions. I do feel like this year I'm just not as angry at books that I have been in the past, just because I DNF'd so much stuff. So this like worst list, there's a couple of like, yes, they will go down in infamy as books that I really hate, but none of them are like detest, really loathing. Like when I think last year I had my worst book ever, and I still am blocking out what that book is called. So like this was definitely a much more chill year where, yeah, I read a lot of bad books. I didn't finish really any of them, so I didn't feel as angry. So it may seem like I had a really rough reading year, but these really, okay, there are some that are really, really bad on this list, but nothing that just makes me want to rip my hair out, except for number 1 and 2. Numbers 1 and 2 are that way. I did finish 2 books that actually were horrific. And remember, this is all my opinion. These are the worst books in my opinion that I read in 2024. Not everybody else's. There are definitely some on this list that people love. Like, you're not gonna be surprised because you've been watching this channel. If you haven't, you may be a little bit surprised about some of these on the worst list. So first, let's go to the honorable mentions, which will include some DNFs and kind of like lower 2 stars. So first up, we have a DNF, and it was It Will Only Hurt for a Moment by Delilah S. Dawson. Hugely disappointing. I have read Bloom by this author and Guillotine, and I love both of them. It Will Only Hurt for a Moment was awful. It was awful. I DNF'd at 50% and it just was written incredibly poorly. All the characters were horrible, and not in like a fun to read them getting murdered off kind of way. It was legitimately, this is painful to read, and everything that happened was so cliche. You could literally be told, hey, this is the background for this book, and you could write the plot yourself. That is how obvious everything is in this book. So I didn't finish it. I got to 50%, and then I did read the ending, and like I said, everything was as it should be according to the guesses. So I hate that. I hate when it's that obvious, on top of having bad characters and kind of bad writing, especially compared to Bloom and Guillotine. It's super weird. Next up, we have Mickey 7. This was a 2-star, a very low 2-star. Hated the main character. That was really what it came down to. I absolutely loathed the main character and everything that he did. I love the concept of this one, but I think it just totally missed the mark of what this could have been. If somebody else was writing this book, like if you had John Mars writing this one, or if you had whoever wrote The Martian, I cannot remember his name right now, had him write it, phenomenal. Phenomenal, because the idea is so good. It's not like super new, like there's been cloning type of stuff, but it was executed so poorly, so very poorly. I still, again, will be watching the movie though, because I think the movie could tone down the main character but and actually make it palatable. Another honorable mention is Coup de Grace. It was a DNF. Again, the idea behind this is really, really good, but it was horrifically boring and just very poorly executed. And again, the main character was just so insufferable. It had some of the most beautiful quotes, but everything else, it just felt so hollow as a story. It was like this author like just threw in a bunch of beautiful things and then was like, this is what I actually wanted to write about. Here's the rest of the plot, like whatever. I do think it had like a very interesting thing to it, but I literally DNF'd it before that interesting thing. And then I had to go and check on it and I was like, this isn't enough to bring me back to this book because I hated the rest of it. So again, another book that I think could have been written by a different author, like potentially Delilah S. Dawson, because this is a novella and I'm thinking I just really like Delilah S. Dawson's novellas. I think this would have been really good if it was either written by like Cassandra Khaw or Delilah S. Dawson, but this was not it. Again, not executed very well at all. We had another 2-star. This is an honorable mention for disappointed list as well. A Housemaid's Wedding. Unnecessary. It was so unnecessary. I like the Housemaid series. I know that's kind of like controversial, especially as someone who reads a lot of mystery thrillers. I like that series. My mom also loves that series. We read it together. And I told her, do not read it. Do not read The Housemaid's Wedding. It is pointless. It is stupid. It is the little novella that she just came out with that bridges the gap between books 2 and 3 because there's a huge time gap. And all it is following our main character on her wedding day. It is legitimately pointless and awful and feels rushed. Like it feels like a last minute thought that she just had and was like, oh, let's just put that out there. It was terrible. It was terrible. Would not recommend reading that even if you like the Housemaid series. It doesn't add anything. Another honorable mention is A Feather So Black. This probably would be higher on the list and actually in the top 10 if I could remember anything about this book. I just remember that I read it for a Fairy Loot vlog and I remember struggling through the book, refusing to DNF, which I should have, hoping that something would like pick up the pace. But the book was so repetitive, I could not tell you what actually happened in it other than our main character and her whatever the heck he is going in and out of Feylands. That is all I remember. I don't remember anything else. I really detest this book, but it's not higher up because I legitimately can't tell you exactly why I hated it because I don't remember it. Then we have, again, this one probably should be higher up as well, except I can't remember it and I just read it. It is The Wren and the Holly Library. We read this for our book club for November, and I take full blame. I'm the one who chose that book. Don't know. Couldn't tell you what happened in this one either. I just remember it was a really, really, really bad Beauty and the Beast retelling, and it's kind of solidified the point of these beautiful books that are coming out, beware, because a lot of them are really bad, like really bad. This one was just written so poorly. The plot line was so awful and didn't make any sense. There were so many like weird plot hole things going on that it made my brain hurt while I was reading it. A whole vlog for that one if you want spoilers and stuff. I didn't even talk about that many spoilers because it like the second I would read it, it would just fly out of my head. Like that's it. It was just, again, it would have been higher up, but I can't remember it. And then the last honorable mention is Murder Road, and that one was just yeah, it's just bad. It's just bad. Plotline bad, characters bad. Everything is very two-dimensional. Half the plot isn't really even important to the story. It didn't really matter to the end of the book. So again, another Simone St. James that was an absolute stinker. So I am hoping that after this one and the Book of Cold Cases, we get something good, please, because the last two have been brutal. Okay, we are on to the actual top 10. Most of these, all of them are 1 stars. All of them are 1 stars except for one, but I'll explain when we get to it because it's 5 books in one, so you can probably guess what that book is. So coming in at number 10 is Incidents Around the House. This is a weird one because I can appreciate so much of this book. I actually loved the first 50% of this book. I was thinking this was going to be a 5-star book. I was shocked. I was terrified. I had nightmares for days. I was terrified of my closet. Oh my gosh, like it takes a lot to actually make me scared of a book. There's only 3. There's only 3 books that exist that have actually scared me, and that is World War Z. I threw that in a dumpster. I was reading it. It scared me so much. I got about halfway through. I was having nightmares constantly. I was passing a dumpster and I just tossed it in. I was too scared of it. Number 2 is We Used to Live Here. Had nightmares for days. Not for like obvious reasons. Like it's not like, it's like thought-wise scary. Like, there's just so much going on. And then number 3 is Incidents Around the House. This book legitimately terrified me. However, the back half of the book was a mess. It was so bad, and I despised the ending. If you write a bad ending, it cannot save the rest of a good book for me. If you leave everything off on a sour note, no, absolutely not. Like, that ruins a book for me. And that almost is why it also gets a 1 star, is it was so good, and then it was so bad, and it made me angry how bad it became. This book definitely would have been significantly better as a novella. It just didn't need the amount of time that went into like explaining things, because it was scarier when you felt it was more like an imagination thing and in this kid's head potentially. It explained too much and then explained absolutely nothing in the final chapter. Awful. So bad. Should have been a novella, and then it potentially could have been 5 stars. Coming in at number 9 is Midnight is the Darkest Hour by Ashley Winstead. I have a whole video doing it was actually a lot of fun. I kind of want to do another one next year, but it takes a lot of time. It was on my, it was on a poster board, because I don't think it was on my whiteboard. I couldn't find my whiteboard. It's on poster board, pictures, names, where I point out things are going on. It was so much fun explaining that book. It's so bad though. It is like, it's like, if this book did not take itself so seriously, this could have been a 5-star parody. That's how bad the book is, but you could tell the author was taking it so seriously that you're just sitting there going, oh honey, like Southern, like it's following like Southern Baptist or Southern, I wouldn't say Southern Baptist, but Southern religion and the effect on people, and a vampire scare cult thing going on. And yeah, I was sitting there going, oh honey, reading this book, and you never want to be doing that. That's a cuss. I've learned that as a curse phrase in the South, having been around Southern people now. That's what I was doing though while I was reading it. It was just like, oh, don't do this to yourself. Don't. It was so bad. It was, again, 5-star for a parody, 1 star for an actual serious book. It's just Twilight. It's literally just a parody on Twilight without the author realizing it was a parody. That's the best way to describe that book. Next up is the complicated one, because I think I did originally give it 2 stars, but like the more I think about it, the more I loathed this series. I read it as 1 volume, the Mindfuck series. Hated it. I hated it. After the amount of people who were like, oh my gosh, I love this book, I was like, this can't be that bad. It was that bad. And then people were like, oh no, get through the first book. Get through the first 2 books and it gets so much better. Arguably, the first book was the best one. I think I gave the first one out of the 5 a 3-star, and then I gave 2 stars to book 2 and then 1s to books 3 through 5. It was so bad. It was so poorly written. The characters were just like insane. They were insane parodies of real characters. The plot line made no sense half the time. There were plot holes everywhere in that series. I legitimately don't really get this one, and I'm so sorry if you like this series, but I actually do not get it. I should have stuck to my guns. I made a whole video about books that I wasn't going to read because I didn't think I was going to enjoy them, but I decided to do an anti-TBR video where I read this book because I caved to the peer pressure, and it was as bad as I thought. It was as bad as I thought it would be, and I hated it. I really did. So that whole series comes in at number 8. It would be higher if not for book 1 in that series. Next up is number 7, and we have Violet Made of Thorns, which is actually one that I read pretty recently for Owlcrate. It was pretty much everything about the book was bad. Everything about the book was bad. Oh, I'm trying to think where to start with this one. First of all, the plot makes no sense. It's following a main character who has like prophecy visions or whatever, and she's faking them to make the prince get married because that's what the king wants, and the prince and her are at odds and they hate each other. It's said that this is like an enemies to lovers. No, they just hate each other. They absolutely hate each other through the whole book. This did not turn into a romance. It never turned into romance. Well, I was like, no, they pretty much hated each other through up until they said I love you, and then still were acting like they hated each other. So it was so bizarre. And then the plot, really can't remember it because I don't think it was even remotely important. I don't understand like what the point of a plot even was in this book. I think it would have been better just to focus on it being like almost like a dark romance. I feel like if they had just, if she had gone adult fantasy and just leaned into like the dark fantasy idea, it could have actually done something. But because it was young adult and was very much pulled back, it was just two characters who hated each other and thought that they didn't. I don't know. It was just very bad. I will say one of my subscribers commented and said, hey, this was supposed to be a duology. That explains a lot. That explains so much, because it's like they hate each other for, I'm not kidding, like 90% of the book. And then it's like all of a sudden everything happens in the last 10% and you're like, what the heck? Like, what was that? Like, what just happened? So it's like she wrote the book and then just had to change the last 10% and left everything else. So the book didn't matter, the romance didn't matter, nothing mattered in this book, and I will not remember it because it's already fading from my memory. I will not remember that this book even existed in a couple of months. Next, we have number 6, and this one is high up because of my anger and how high my expectations for this book was. The Hollow Heart. This was a crazy reading experience. This is going out after I post my series things, so I'm not worried about talking about it, but I read this for my finishing series thing that I was doing for the Lazy Book Club for December, because we were trying to bust them series, I guess. Is that what the kids are saying? I read The Midnight Lie like 4 years ago, and then I bought the second book and then I just never read it. So it's the one that I pulled, so I had to reread The Midnight Lie, which was not as good as I remember it. It went from a 5-star to a 3-star. And then I picked up The Hollow Heart, and it was arguably one of the worst sequels that I've ever read. It did something that I absolutely hate in sequels, and I'm trying to think of how to say it without like spoiling the whole thing, but I arguably do not think you should read this book. The first book focused so heavily on the romance. It was obviously like one of the main key features of the book. And then the second book took that away. Our two main characters did not see each other until the last 30 pages of the book of The Hollow Heart. And it's just a duology. Like, there's not another book. That was it. They had completely separate storylines that did not mesh together at all until the last like 30 pages. And it was crazy. It was a crazy decision to do that, because the first book had to do with one character, and then the second book was like it had to do with the other character, and she just wanted a sequel to the Winter's Curse series. Like, that's what she wanted. She like wrote the first book and was like, I'm kind of bored of this. Let's just talk more about the Winter's Curse and the characters in there. That's literally what this book was. It was probably the worst sequel I've ever read. Ooh, this one. I actually have kept this one, but I'm not gonna go get it. Bless Your Heart. I was shocked about how much I hated this. I am a cozy mystery, cozy horror, big fan. Big fan. I like some cozy fantasy, but I'm definitely more mystery horror. And so Bless Your Heart is like a cozy horror following a family of morticians who take care of vampire stuff. Perfect. Literal perfection. It was awful. The writing was horrendous. The characters were terrible. It bounced around so much. It was so hard to follow along with what was going on. There was like 6 characters we were following. I think it was like 3, but it felt like 6. And you would get finished with one chapter, and it would kind of start getting interesting, and then it would switch to a totally different character who would summarize the previous character, what they were talking about, and then continue with their story, and then it would kind of start getting interesting, switch to another character who would summarize the past 2 chapters and then get into their thing. And it was like, oh my God, why? I just read that. I remember what happened. Why are you like doing this? Why are you doing this? It was like seeing every event in 3 or 4 different perspectives. Do you know how exhausting and obnoxious that is? I wanted to beat my skull with a hammer while I was reading this book because it was so repetitive, but I just kept reading it. I don't know why I kept reading it. I just kept going. Oh, you know what? I know why I finished reading it. I read this for horror in June or horror in July when I read a bunch of horror books. Then I read this horror movie, which I DNF'd in that video, and then another one. And so I had just DNF'd horror movie, and I'm not DNFing another one for this video, and so I forced myself through Bless Your Heart. And I've kept it, and now I have an e-arc of book 2. I don't know what I'm doing. This is turning into the stupid Stephen Graham Jones, hard as a chainsaw situation where I just keep hate reading things in that series. Although I did finally DNF the third one. I did not do that to myself. I did not finish the third one. But I gave the first one like a 1 star, I gave the second one a 2 star. So maybe if I read the second book, it might be a 2-star. But basically something happened at the end of book 1 that I was like, oh, what? Maybe? Maybe? So I'm gonna try book 2, but I don't have high hopes for it. But God, it was such a cool premise. And also, people were saying it was so funny. It was not funny. I think that's what killed me the most, is it seems like it should be hilarious, and there was no humor in that book. Or the humor was just like, what? Like, what kind of humor is this? But there was like no humor. If it was funny, I think the book would have been amazing, but again, it almost took itself too seriously for what was going on in the book. Ooh, I can tell I'm up there. I'm getting up there in the books that I don't like. Coming in at number 4, we have The Dare by Natasha Preston. This is the one that finally broke the camel's back when it comes to her books. I will not be reading another Natasha Preston. I unhauled the other 2 unread books that I have by her. I had DNF'd a book earlier this year also by her, but I actually finished The Dare. I liked a lot of that book. And then, of course, as usual, her endings suck. She cannot write an ending to a book to save her life. It was so bad, and that's it. I have nothing else to say about that other than I hate her books. I feel like that's such an extreme thing to say, but I legitimately have never liked a book that she has written, and I think I've read or attempted to read at least 5, and I have hated every single one of them. I think last year I might have had one of her books on this list, or it was a DNF or something. I can't do it anymore, but her book, I love her book covers, I love her book premises, and they're short, and they just seem like they're gonna be such a good time, and then every single time, I'm sitting there going, this is garbage. What am I doing? What am I doing with my life? So yeah, that was finally the one that broke me. Finally broke me and was like, I cannot continue doing this. And at number 3 is one that I'm gonna get some crap about. Okay. Not as much as number 1. Number 1 is gonna be a problem. Number 3 is Barrier Gaze. I did not like this. I can understand why other people liked it though. I feel like it's one of the few up on the top that I'm like, oh yeah, I get it. I get why people are liking this. For me, it was not my type of horror at all. I thought it was just way too bizarre. And mostly, like, I kind of was just mostly bored through most of the book. But what really makes this like a high 1-star is what was the ending of that book? Like, what happened? I still don't know if I can tell you fully what happened at the end of the book. And again, another, to me, unsatisfying ending. And that is always gonna ruin a book for me, is if the ending I don't like. And so not only was the whole book super boring, it also had 0 payoff. I hated it. I hated it. The only thing that I liked about this book were the discussions about gay characters when they're finally happy, they're killed off in TV shows. It happens all the time, especially in fantasy shows. I feel like it is getting better as of lately because people have, like, you know, been pointing it out and like, hey, this doesn't make me like a movie or show any better. So it points that out and talks about the film industry as a whole, which I liked that aspect of it. I loathed everything else. I hated our main character. I hated the decisions he was making. This whole thing was hella depressing as a book. And it was just so weird. It was so strange. If you like weird horror, this might be for you, but it gets so weird, especially at the end of the book. So this was like, I read it and I was like, this is a 1-star. It was the easiest 1-star. No, the top 2 were the easiest 1-stars, but it was one of the easiest 1-stars I gave this year. Coming at number 2 is The House of Last Resort. This was awful. This was awful, and I will not read another Christopher Golden. I remember his name so that I don't pick up another book by him. This was one that I finished when I was still not DNFing as much. If I had read this towards the end of the year, I would have DNF'd this one, rightly so. But the premise is so cool. Haunted house, basically, in Italy, and you have a married couple trying to deal with it. But the obviousness with which this was written by a man was painful. I thought we were past this. It's been a while since I read a book where it's like, man wrote this. Obviously written by a man. I can't. It was, number 1, it was boring. The horror was super lame. But what killed me and what made it a 1-star immediately was the whole scene where there's like I'm trying to remember, it's been a while since I read the book. There was like a bump in the night and they hear it and the woman gets up basically naked, she's not wearing pants, and she's walking around this house trying to figure out what's going on. And I'm like, a man wrote this. A man wrote this because, yeah, no woman is walking around without pants or at least covering themselves trying to go find an axe murderer. That's just not realistic, and I don't know why men think it's so cute because they put it in their books all the time. I don't get it. I would love to never read that or see that in a movie ever again. Ever again. Because it makes no sense. Because it's not a thing. It's not a thing, especially if you have them right next to you. Because, like, she gets up out of bed, clothes. She's in the bedroom, clothes. It's not like you're coming out of the shower and you see someone running at you or something and you're fighting. That's different. Still don't love it because it seems on purpose, but that happens. You're in a bedroom, find some pants. So I was really ticked off about this. So it immediately just gave me such a massive ick that I was over it. And it just sucked as a book in general too. My number one book, it's crazy because I read this back when we were still in the temp house. It is crazy to me to think that I started the year off in my old house and then I was in a temp house and now I'm in my new house. It just feels like I've been here for so much longer because I love this house so much. This is when I was doing my series, or I did a one-off. I think I'm going to continue it just because it was a lot of fun, where I read one of the most hyped books on my TBR and one of my least hyped books, and I tried to do some like books that were similar. So they were both in the mystery thriller-ish category with like kind of like a school setting. And I DNF'd the low one, but I finished the hyped up one, and that is Confessions. I actually despise this book. This book will go on my least favorite books ever. This has ranked among with The Secret History and the book that I read last year that I still can't remember the name of. But this is up there with it because of multiple reasons. Number one, I just didn't like the plot. I didn't like the writing. And I don't know if the writing was due to translation because this was a translated book. So potentially that could have been an issue for me as well. Like if I just didn't like the way it was translated. So I didn't like anything else about it. So I wouldn't try it. But that is a potential thing. So I won't blame the original author for that just in case that's that. So I won't say that 100%, but I didn't like the writing. I didn't like the plot. I didn't like the characters. I didn't like that this was like focusing around like children murder things that were going on. It was so weird. Then half of the chapters were just rehashing everything from the previous chapters. It had like a cool idea where it was like telling the same story from multiple different perspectives, but it ended up just being super, super repetitive. But what killed me, and this is a cultural difference, because I was looking it up after I read this book because I was like, what is going on in this? Like, this is actually horrible. There is, the whole thing is revolving around something relating to HIV. And so one of the characters potentially is infected with HIV as almost like a threat. And it's horrible. It is horrible to take HIV, which is a very serious medical condition that is used a lot of times as a way to discriminate against the LGBTQ plus community, especially gay men. Like, it's literally used to call gay men dirty. And I'm in public health. I actually specialized in bringing care to people who had HIV or were even in full-blown AIDS. And it was horrible seeing how upset they were because they had friends that wouldn't talk to them anymore. They had people who wouldn't want to go to the bathroom after them. All this type of stuff was surrounding this. And they were like, my life is over because of this. And they weren't even focused mostly on the medical issue. They were more focused on the social stigma behind it. And it killed me seeing that in this book. Like, it made me so angry and like filled with rage. And I looked it up, and it definitely, HIV care has come so far, especially in the United States, like how we deal with it. We have whole task force to help the community, and it definitely is seen significantly different in other countries. And so I have to take that and accept that, but I still hated it and I didn't want to read about it, and it was horrible. It was actually horrific to read, the stigma surrounding it, just like there on the page. Like, oh my gosh, like it was crazy. It was crazy. I can see not a lot of people realizing how bad that was because they haven't worked directly with HIV patients. But for me, it was I'm like literally shaking. That's how much I hated this book. I didn't want to make this like video super serious, but this is a serious issue that I have with this book. So that is why it is number one. I also just didn't like it. Like Besides that, if you take the HIV stuff out, still just didn't like it. Didn't like the writing, characters, none of the plot. So if you want to take that out, still didn't like it. Still would have been a 1 star. I don't know if it would have been number 1. It would have been up there. It would have still been on this list. So anyway, that's all I had for you guys. Ending on that serious note, definitely let me know down in the comments down below your list of worst books for this year and why you didn't like them, etc. If you've read any of these, if you enjoyed any of these. I hope you guys enjoyed some of these because you always want to like books. That's the thing about these negative videos. It's like, I hope someone out there loved these books. And yeah, I'm glad this one is done so that we can move on to more positive things. I do still have disappointing to do, but it's not like this video. It's very much different than this video. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure you like the video if you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future content. Like I said, we got surprising, disappointing, and best books coming up. Also new releases of January. We just got a lot of stuff going on. And yeah, that is everything I have for you guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys in the next video.